Hello and welcome to a conversation with Joe Caruso with your guest, Darius, and your host, Joe Caruso.
Darius,
Joe,
good to see
hello.
you.
Great to see you too.
Thanks, man. And I'm going to ask you, as I said in our brief conversation a couple weeks ago, the same question I ask all my clients, and that is, how is your mind today?
It should be a little. My mind is good. I woke up with a little bit of a migraine.
Oh, I
So
didn't know. I didn't know they came in dosages. I thought they were always.
no, mine's like it's like a subtle migraine. So
Ouch.
so yeah, I'm performing despite my migraine. But I'm doing well. Like, overall, I was mentioning earlier, I got back from I did 2 weeks in Costa Rica and had a really nice month of July. I know I'm not good at taking time off, so I took a lot of time off and feeling great. Like the outside of the tactical issue of a migraine, I feel amazing.
You know, in music, we can fall back on our chops. We call it in jazz business. Um, so if let's say that your motor skills aren't as strong as normal, or something's going on, and you have a headache or something like that. If you've got chops, you can usually pull it through.
Yeah,
And
I'm
and
doing.
uh,
I'm totally leaning on my chops.
yeah, very important. That's why, again, and that's why I know we've talked about meditation. Meditation is critical in getting a handle on how to control the focus, your mind's ability to focus.
Yeah, it's funny. I got really into meditation about beginning of 2019. So 19, it was like April of 19 was when I used to say there's two things in life I hate doing: meditation and hiking. And I still hate hiking, but 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 the goals to which I think they're very similar. Maybe I haven't hiked since I don't like it. I haven't done it, but I got into meditation uh about 2.5 years ago. I was going through a pretty like tumultuous time in my life, and picked up finally figured out how to make help meditation work for me. And it was interesting. I had an epiphany with it, and this is, a lot of people I think that probably meditation can best serve or folks who are, achievers, hard drivers, people that are kind of go, go, go on. Like I'm describing my entire life prior to the, and so when I would meditate, I'd say like, I just don't get it. Like I was sitting here, I'm not good at it, right? Which is a really funny thing to say about meditation. Like to not be good at meditation is I actually think it's as an oxymoron now. But I'm like, oh, I'm not good at it. I don't like it. I'm like counting the seconds for it to be done with. I'm
When
just
does
like,
it start to work?
yeah, when's it gonna work? And I was realizing I'm like closing your eyes and getting your head. That thing I didn't like was that I was trying to be in it, and the reality was as you just have to observe it, right? Like the and what was and so the minute I realized, oh, doing it is the act of observing it. I don't know. I flipped a switch or something where I was like, oh, I get it now. Like there is no being good at this. Like doing it like just the act of doing it just gives you. It's like the way I like to describe it to folks is I say it's like watching a movie. Okay. And whatever's happening during that meditation is what's happening the rest of my day, more than likely. Right. It's kind of like in the music in the background. And so if I'm having like these crazy thoughts or I can't focus or I'm, whatever, like anxious, or that's happening while I distract away from that constantly. And then the minute I'm done being distracted with my conference call or my business problem or my wife wants what she wants to eat for dinner with, or we want to go take the kids, or I go back to that state. And I was like, oh, so this is just paying attention to that state. And the more I pay attention to it, then I could start to like try to quiet it down and just like just not have anything happen during that state, right? And so it was an interesting journey for me, because I'm telling you, I'd say two things I hate hiking and meditation. But the minute I started just like quit trying to be good at it and just like showed up no matter what, good, bad, whatever, man, life changer. Now I will say that I ended up I haven't meditated in a while. I mean, it's been, I've kind of been off of it for probably a few months now, but I do still love it. I use the Waking Up app by Sam Harris. That's my favorite one. I think Sam Harris is a genius. And yeah, it's a game changer, man. I think everyone, if you're bad at it, it means you're trying to be good at it, which is defeats the purpose. So I love it. I think any high performing individual needs anyone that wants to be their best self. Forget about being high performing. Anyone who wants to be their best self, you got to figure out a way to have some mindfulness practices.
That's so true. The mind, I always say, is a terrible thing, and you're not in charge of it most of the time.
Yeah.
But to get in charge of it is to be able to observe it, as you said.
Yeah.
And then when you need to regulate, have those meditation chops work for you, so that you can say, okay, I don't need to be this angry right now, or I don't need to be this upset, or maybe there's a solution here. Maybe I can see the other person's perspective better if I just shut myself up a little bit. And meditation provides the chops for that to happen. And most people that have done it now, I've got a client that's doing it now for over 3.5 years straight. Couldn't get him to do it for 5 or 6. And now he says it's the secret weapon. He won't give it up. So it's always good to have those kind of chops. Some people don't know they have to regulate. Or in the answer to my question, how's your mind today? Some days you just let it go, because it's going to be really sharp. It's going to be wicked fast. It's creative. And it's like writing a new book, which I'm doing right now. Some days it writes itself, and some days you just stare at the keyboard.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel you. I felt like that when I wrote my book too. And I'm with you. It's interesting. I think that where it kind of changed my life for the best. I did this conscious leadership program called Stagen, which is all around the integral leadership program there. And I did it in 2019. And Rand, who's the CEO and chairman, he was my mentor in that program. And, we talked about this because right when I discovered meditation, I saw him at this program called Gathering of Titans that I do at MIT. And he was one of the keynotes. And I was in this program also. So it was like we were off site of the program and just kind of having wine and chit chatting. And I told him I was like really fired up. Anytime like I'm like an all or nothing type of guy, unfortunately. So if I figure I'm like, oh my God, this thing I hated, I now love, and I get it. I get it. I finally get it. Like I get why people like this. And he's like, and his whole thing was, the Buddhists call this, the equanimity is like the state. It's like you're not happy or there's no like joy or despair. You're just there, right? And observing. And I do somatic experience therapy, and my somatic experience therapist kind of said, they said, look, you're just giving yourself some space to observe, not necessarily to react, right? And that extra split second, and then having an awareness around like, oh, whoa, I'm showing up like that right now. It's a hair trigger difference in timing, but it makes all the difference in the world, right?
That's exactly right. I was having dinner with Dr. Curtis Bristol and Dr. Joel Lichtenberg in DC several years ago. And one of Joe's point was the mind is a restorative organ. The brain is the organ, but the mind is a restorative function. So if you're constantly pounding at all or nothing and you're thinking, okay, now what am I going to say? What am I going to do next? Where am I going? If that's always going on in your head, then it's very difficult to pull back, be more observant of why am I driving, for example, this opportunity. That's one way that I really have the upper hand in negotiating for clients. First I'm more objective because I'm the facilitator. But also I know how to sometimes watch what a mind, because that's my expertise, is fixating on something, and I want it fixated on anything but the game ball, so that we can get to a place where both nervous systems are comfortable. And now we already know what our game ball is.
Right.
And I don't want to take their ball from them, but I do want to make sure that they want to negotiate with me again later in the future. And if I get too wrapped up with all my fear fantasies on that game ball, I can't be quite as observant, and I can't give myself the space that it needs to restore my capacities to get my nervous system out of the way.
Yeah.
100% true. And it helps with writing too. Tell us about your book.
So I wrote, this is my book. It's the core value equation. And so it's essentially a framework. It's my secret weapon for scaling businesses and life. Decided yesterday I'm writing a new book, which is the core value equation for families. But the motivation around it was I got really obsessed with core values, leveraging the tool of core values in business. In about 2008, I got introduced to core values through Vern Harnish, who from Gazelles and Scaling Up.
Sure.
He is one of my mentors. I did a program of his that's now called EO MIT through Entrepreneurs Organization. Back then it was called Birthing of Giants, and it was put on by MIT Enterprise Forum, EO, and Inc. magazine. And they took together 60 high growth entrepreneurs under the age of 40 from all over the world. We're very international. We started in 2006 and we got done in 2008. First thing we're taught is you got to have core values in your company. We get introduced to the Scaling Up methodology, and all these people have some really exciting, crazy businesses. My business at that point ended up being 40th in the Inc. 5000, number 40 in the Inc. 5000. And I was young. I was 26, 27 when I started that program. And I got introduced to core values, but I didn't know what to do with them. And I got really inquisitive about it. And like I said, I'm kind of an all or nothing type of person. For whatever reason, the core values, I didn't find core values found me. And I just kept thinking these have to do something more than what they're doing. And, long story short, I basically had this moment when I was at year 3 of Birthing of Giants, where the room we had a peer-to-peer workshop, and it was being put on by Ken Sim and John DeHart, who some people may know those names, that they're the co-CEOs of a company out of Canada called Nurse Next Door. Nurse Next Door is a scaling up case study, one of the top places to work in Canada. And these guys are like core value evangelists. I mean, these guys are like all about scaling up and core values. And so they did this. It was the night of graduation, and Ken and John are standing in front of the class, and they said, please stand up if your company has core values. So mind you, this is year 3. Year 1, we're taught we need to have core values, and like the first day we're there. So everyone stands up because they're all CEOs. We've all been taught this is what we're supposed to have. And we all, supposedly have core values in our business. So we all stand up because we all part of the program, and that's part of the program. So John says, please stay standing if you know your core values of your company off the top of your head. Half the room sits down. Now, mind you, this is 2008. So this is a little bit of a different business world from a conscious leadership standpoint. And, core values are not what they are today. And I would argue they have a lot more runway and room to grow. But back then it was like, yeah, mission, vision, values, you got to have them. But like, there was almost like a catchphrase to say that.
Exactly.
Right. Like to have them and then to actually make them come to life are totally different statement. Oh, so yeah. Please stay standing if your company has core values. Everyone stands up. Please stay standing if you know your company core values, which, by the way, everyone in this room created their own values. Half the room sits down. I'm in that group. I sat down. My company at that point had 6 values, 76 words. I couldn't tell you one sentence of them. I built them. I just didn't know them. Like, they were just complicated. The intention was in the right place, but the execution was poor. Second question, please stay standing if your your employees know your core values, could say them off the top of their head. Half of the remaining half sits down. Like almost the whole room sitting down at this point. Please stay standing. Last question. Please stay standing if your customers know your core values. Everyone's sitting down. And I don't know, man, for whatever reason, that moment kind of like rocked my world. My life changed that moment. And the next morning I was sitting down, we graduated that night. We went out drinking in Boston. I was a little bit hungover. I'm sitting in a diner in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And I was really beating myself up. I was being hard on myself, which, that's something I've been working on. But then I wasn't even 30 years old. I was just really wanted to do well. And I rewrote my values, and it went from 6 values, 76 words to 4 values, 9 words: do work, live zen, break the box, wow everyone. And right away I made a hard left, and I went back to the organization. I reintroduced them to the values, and it set me down this journey for the next 5 years, from 2008 to 2013, where I experimented. I was like a mad scientist experimenting with how do you make values come to life. And the conclusion I landed on was you got to make it easy and you got to make it meaningful. And you got to prepare for your team to use them against you. And so those next 5 years, I really played with it. Fast forward to 2013, I started my next company, and my next company was a pretty, like, objectively a big success. It grew from, when we started it, there was about 30 of us. And in 18 months, we grew it to about 300. And in the following 18 months, we grew it to 1,000.
Hard to manage that fast growth.
Well, so that's actually the point of the story is at month 18, I'm standing there and I'm looking around and I'm like, how did I do this? And I noticed something really specific. Everyone was speaking the same language, and the language was the values. They were talking using our core value language. It was so alive and well. And the business at that point had grown dramatically in 18 months. It wasn't because we had this amazing infrastructure. We bootstrapped it. So it's not like we had some funding I didn't have some amazing chief people officer. I didn't have training team. I didn't have any of that stuff. I had nothing. But what I did have was I had core values that I had figured out how to bring them to life in the organization in a very specific and very meaningful way that was user-friendly to the organization. And I was like, man, I'm onto something. Now, if you thought I went crazy those 5 prior years, now what I didn't tell you was I didn't have a lot of business success during those 5 years. So I was just doing it kind of in a corner by myself, but from 2013 to 2018, when we grew that business, it really, like, it's one of the top, the business right now manages $100 billion of mortgages. I mean, it's a legit business. It's one of the top 10 FHA like servicers in the United States. That time I had resources. So I really got to play with values. And so the book is really what my learnings, and what it is it's a framework on how do you take values and use them as a tool so that you can turn them into what I call really the most valuable tool you have for your organization. Because what it does is it does 3 things. It creates a language for the organization, the language of accountability, which is core values. It creates a magnet for talent, and it creates the most important thing it does, which is what I had kind of witnessed in that by 2015, when I was noticing the effect it had, was it creates an invisible manager for the business. People know what they're supposed to be doing, like intuitively, if you've done all the right work to bring the right people in whose values align. I don't have to look over your shoulder, Joe, and say, Joe, why aren't you, live in the core value of giving great service? You just do it organically. You don't have to think about it. You do it because that's who you are. Right. So the book's really, how do you do that? How do you build this core value driven organization? How do you create core values that become viral and sticky in the organization? And how do you do it where, it can really change lives? And yeah, I'm really proud of the book. I launched it September last year. It's Amazon bestseller. It's getting a lot of traction now. And I'm thinking about book number 2, like I said, which is Core Value Equation for Families, which is a whole different story. That fast forwards to when I failed with doing it in my family, but I had done it in my business. So,
a couple of thoughts come to mind. My book's on quintessential leadership. And we talk a lot about foundational context. We have a lot of invisible or unexamined foundational context in our mind about who we are. And it's only when you really do the work, as you found out, you go from wordsmithing with 76 words to what's at the core of this thing. I mean, it's right there in the title. And when I know when I went to find out who I was at 18 years old, and spent the rest of my life doing that my goal was, when I can write who I am on the head of a pen, I'll have it.
Oh, nice.
And the longer it is, the more I don't have it.
Yeah.
And so it's always fun to re-examine how, not only what you're doing, but how you're doing it, to find out where you might be fooling yourself. Many people will tell you that they're walking that direction, but you're watching them go that direction.
Yeah.
And then they'll say things like, I really love change. The thing I like most about this restaurant, I come here every day for lunch and I get the same thing. And did you just hear yourself at all?
Yeah.
And that's why it's good to have people looking in from the outside who can see how you're approaching it, whatever it is. I've always said a problem is the distance between what is and what should be in your mind. And quite often there's more easy ways to define the problem that open up a whole world of possibilities of solutions. The minute we define a problem, we've decided all of the solutions our mind will not consider.
Right.
And so sometimes just backing up and saying, hey, how am I defining this? How am I defining core values? And if your customer can write down your core values without you ever telling them, game on.
Yeah.
Ultimate.
It's really hard, right? But
yeah.
to your point, it's but there's a Japanese word for this, which I think you kind of just nailed when you were talking about the pinhead. There is complexity and simplicity, right? And so I think that's my book's really a book about design. How do you design the organization to end up where you expect to be, right? You have to, you can't do that by happen chance, right? You got to do that by design. And then like if you're like me and you're a slow learner, you have to like beat your head against the wall a little bit until you don't have too many options left. Then you kind of land on the right answer sometimes. Then you start to say, well, am I designing my life for the outcome that I want, right? And to your point, getting some unbiased third-party objective feedback can be pretty valuable for people, because what I found, you said a word that, so we fool ourselves, and I'm like, oh man, I'm a bastard liar to myself. I'm like and I pride myself on being very honest, but yet many people who are very quote unquote honest people, like, we figure out how to fool ourselves to protect ourselves, from probably the work that you need to do to really set yourself free from having to tell yourself those lies. And what I found is coaching tends to, not all coaches are created equal, but good coaching tends to give you a nice mirror and give you an objective piece of feedback that you can maybe look at things from a different angle. So it's interesting to see how values play into that and mindfulness plays into that, because I think they're all very important.
Yeah, I know a captain just coming out of the Navy. He wants to be a life coach. And so he's talking to me about the process, and I'm trying to explain to him it's vast and various differences between really understanding what it takes to create a solid coaching relationship and just giving good advice to someone based on a pattern or a cookie cutter process. And trust is a very big requirement. You have to be able, if you're really a good coach, you're telling people things they already know and want to ignore, will deny, or haven't thought of it because they don't want to. And so being able to listen, have that trusting relationship, and say things in a way that people will hear it are critical aspects of being a coach. It's not just how much information you have. At this point, I know that Mike, our producer, wants to get some questions in. Do you mind if we take a few
Oh
minutes?
yeah. Let's do that. And I apologize. I have a hard stop in 5, so I think
Okay.
so I want to make sure that we don't run out of time.
Okay. Mike, we're going to turn it to you to hear what you have over there.
Yes, sir. So there was a question about you, Darius, had mentioned who you had as mentors, and MIT and EO and Vern Harnish, and those are all about 15, 20 years ago. Who are your current mentors? Who are you following today, and what are you challenging yourself with today?
You know, I don't have a great answer for that right now because I took a hiatus from being mentored. But I just saw I did see, I can't remember what it was on social media the other day as a guide. He said there's 3 different types of mentors: people that are 10 times where you're at, right? So I'm in a group called Tiger 21, which is it's a about 800 people from around the world who are, I mean, these are some freaking game changer people, very, very successful people, business people. So I'm getting some mentoring out of that. And these are people that are, most of them are 10 to 20 years older than I am, that have reached some pretty amazing successes. Probably the average net worth is 9 figures plus. And for me, I look at them as business mentors. A lot of them have lived some amazing lifestyles. So one was, who's 10x where you're trying, who's at least 10x and get a mentor like that. And I think he called them like the Vanguard mentor. So I've been getting that out of, like, again, passively out of that. I did have a coach for a hot minute, Jeff Spencer, who was Lance Armstrong's mindset coach. I worked with him for a few months and we got some really good work done. So I do kind of like cherry pick coaches here and there. Right now I don't have a coach specifically, but I did work with Jeff for the first part of the year, for about the first half of the year. But Tiger's been a really good opportunity for me because that's a 10x. I'm the poorest house on the block, right? The average net worth in the entire group out of 800 people is like $100 million. So I'm like, all right, this is a way for me to like be around people that are doing things I want to learn, which is investing and living a more fulfilled life in this different type of way. The second group is peers. Who are your peers? Who are your people that are at your level that can, to Joe's kind of point, kind of challenge you? I have a lot of that. I'm in a couple forums, peer forums. One could argue some of my peers are in Tiger. There's 10Xers in Tiger, but I'm in like the equivalent of like YPO, EO, Gathering of Titans. So these are CEO forums that I'm in. The third group, which I thought was most interesting, are, and I can't remember the name that he used for them, but it's like those younger than you. These are like people that are just getting started that you could go learn from, that you can mentor, but learning through the mentoring process, where the mentor becomes the mentee. So I'm thinking about looking for more of that. Some really, and I do it, like I do mentor some CEOs and stuff like that, but I love, there's so much change happening in the world, really some game changers who are just newer to the game, have a fresh perspective, going and working with them. So that's an area that I thought to myself this weekend, I'm going to spend a lot more time in there. But that's how I'm that's my perspective around mentoring right now.
We're always guilty of the company we keep. And we sometimes forget that that's a very important aspect of our lives. Hanging around people that are smarter than you, as you get smarter in life, becomes more difficult to do, because you're looking at the difference between them being skeptical and cynical. A cynic can't stand neither the disease nor the cure, as Will Durant said. But someone that can just talk about an idea in a healthful manner, in an intellectual manner, regardless of politics or passion behind it, or even personal experience, is usually bringing quite a considered mind to what the conversation is. And those will make very edifying relationships. I know we're running out of time and I apologize. Darius, thank you very much for all your time this week. Really appreciate it. Great conversation, I thought.
Yeah, this is great, Joe. I appreciate your time, and sorry, I tend to be long-winded. We should have like got a lot more time, but yeah, glad to do this, and yeah, it was a really fun conversation. I appreciate you.
Thanks. We'll stay in touch, and thank everybody for listening in and watching, and we'll see you soon.
Yeah, and if anyone has questions, if they want to like send them to me offline, you can email me, Darius@therealdarius. So I'm happy to answer there.
Thank you all for joining a conversation with Joe Caruso. Tune in on August 17th, where Joe will interview Justin Breen. Thank you all and have a great afternoon.